You know what makes some people dangerous? Not in a violent way, not in a scary movie kind of way, but dangerous to anyone who thinks they can play games, waste time, or take them for granted. It's the people who don't mind being alone. And if you've ever crossed paths with someone like this, truly like this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're different. They move different. They respond different. And most importantly, they leave different. No warning, no drama, just gone. Here's the thing nobody tells you about people who are comfortable being alone. Everyone thinks they're easy targets. Everyone assumes that because they're quiet, because they're not constantly surrounded by people, because they're not posting every moment of their life online, they must be lonely. They must be desperate for connection. They must be so grateful when someone finally pays attention to them that they'll accept any kind of treatment. Now look, sometimes that's actually true. There are people who are alone because they're lonely, because they're struggling to connect, because they genuinely are desperate for someone to notice them. And that's a different situation entirely. But the people we're talking about, the ones who are content being alone, the ones who chose this, for them that assumption is dead wrong. So catastrophically wrong that by the time most people figure it out, the person is already 3 steps out the door and not looking back. See, society has this weird obsession with loneliness. Everyone's terrified of it. They'll stay in toxic friendships just to avoid eating lunch alone. They'll tolerate disrespect in relationships because breaking up means going back to single life. They'll surround themselves with people they don't even like just to fill the silence. But then there's this other breed of person, the one who figured out something that most people spend their entire lives running from. They figured out that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. That solitude isn't punishment, it's power. And that changes everything. Let me paint you a picture of how this usually goes down. Someone meets one of these people, someone who's comfortable being alone. At first, everything seems normal. They're friendly, engaging, fun to be around. They invest in the relationship, they show up, they care. So naturally, the other person starts to relax, starts to take things for granted, starts to assume this person will always be there because, well, they don't seem to have anyone else, right? They're alone most of the time. They must need this friendship, this relationship, this connection. So they start canceling plans last minute. They stop responding to messages with the same energy. They take 3 days to reply. They start treating them like an option instead of a priority. And here's where it gets interesting. The person who's comfortable being alone doesn't fight it, doesn't argue, doesn't send long texts about feeling disrespected or undervalued. They just quietly do the math. Is this person adding value to their life? No. Is this person showing them respect? No. Is this worth their emotional energy? Absolutely not. Calculation complete. Decision made, and then they're gone. The other person doesn't even see it coming. One day they realize they haven't heard from them in weeks. They reach out expecting the usual response and get nothing. Or worse, they get a polite but distant reply that makes it clear something has fundamentally shifted. They try to fix it. They apologize, they promise to do better. They can't understand why this person won't just give them another chance like everyone else does. But here's what they don't get. People who are comfortable being alone don't give second chances the way others do. Not because they're cold or unforgiving, but because they don't need to. They'll be just fine without you, they always are. Here's where everyone gets it twisted. Society sees someone who spends a lot of time alone and immediately assumes something's wrong with them. They must be unsocial, awkward, unable to connect with others, missing out on life. What they don't realize, what they can't wrap their heads around, is that some people choose this, not because they hate people, but because they've figured out that their happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. That's the part that breaks people's brains. We're told from birth that humans are social creatures, that we need connection, that isolation is bad for us. And sure, that's true to an extent, but there's a massive difference between needing people and enjoying people. One is dependency, the other is choice. People who are comfortable being alone have learned to generate their own happiness. They don't need someone else to make their Saturday night meaningful. They don't need constant validation to feel worthy. They don't need a full social calendar to feel like they're living a good life. They've built an internal foundation so solid that other people become a bonus, not a requirement. And that terrifies people who haven't figured that out yet, because it means they have no leverage, no way to manipulate, no fear to exploit. What happens when they choose others? Now here's the beautiful part that most people completely miss. When someone who's comfortable being alone chooses to spend time with you, really chooses you, not just tolerates you out of boredom or loneliness, that means something profound. It means you passed a filter that most people don't even know exists. Think about it. They don't need you, they're perfectly happy by themselves. They've got their own hobbies, their own interests, their own sense of fulfillment. They're not scrolling through their phone on a Friday night, feeling sorry for themselves. So if they're making time for you, it's because they genuinely value what you bring to their life, not what you might bring someday if you change, not the potential they see in you, but who you actually are right now in this moment. That's rare. That's real. That's the kind of relationship most people dream about but never experience because they're too busy collecting people out of desperation to recognize genuine connection when it shows up. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. The moment you take that for granted, the moment you start treating them like they're lucky to get your bare minimum, instead of recognizing that you're lucky to have them, the countdown starts. They won't tell you. They won't sit you down for a serious conversation about their feelings. They'll just start pulling back, slowly and quietly, until one day you realize they're not in your life anymore. You want to know what really sets these people apart? It's not that they're better than everyone else. It's not that they've achieved some enlightened state of being. It's that they have self-respect. Real self-respect. The kind that isn't negotiable. Most people's self-respect has a price. It can be bought with attention, with apologies, with promises of change. They'll tolerate disrespect if someone makes them feel needed. They'll accept poor treatment if the alternative is being alone. But people who are comfortable being alone, their self-respect isn't for sale. You can't buy it with sweet words after treating them poorly. You can't negotiate it away with excuses about being busy or stressed or going through things. You can't guilt-trip them into lowering their standards. They know what they deserve. They know what they bring to the table. And they know that being alone is infinitely better than being disrespected. That's not arrogance. That's not being difficult or unreasonable. That's just basic math. If someone subtracts from your peace and you have the option to remove them from the equation, why wouldn't you? Let me tell you about the moment everything changes. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. There's no big confrontation or emotional scene. Someone who's comfortable being alone will just stop showing up. They'll stop initiating conversations, stop making plans, stop investing energy into something that clearly isn't reciprocated. And if you're the one on the receiving end of this, you might not even notice at first. Maybe you think they're just busy. Maybe you assume they'll reach out eventually. Maybe you're so caught up in your own life that you don't realize weeks have passed without hearing from them. And then one day it hits you. They're gone. Not physically, you could probably still text them and get a polite response, but energetically, emotionally, spiritually, they've moved on. They've done the calculation and decided you're not worth their time anymore. And the wildest part, they're not even mad about it. They're not sitting around hoping you'll realize what you've lost. They're not posting sad quotes or talking about you to mutual friends. They've genuinely just moved on with their life, because that's what people who are comfortable being alone do. They don't waste energy on what isn't working. They cut their losses and keep moving. No hard feelings, no resentment, just a clean exit and a lesson learned about who's worth their time and who isn't. People who are comfortable being alone figured out that their happiness isn't other people's responsibility. I know. That sounds like something you'd read on a motivational poster, but bear with me because this is where it gets real. Most people are out there trying to find happiness in other people. They think the right relationship will complete them. The right friend group will fulfill them. The right social life will finally make them feel whole. And they're going to be searching forever. Because here's what nobody wants to admit. If you can't be happy by yourself, you won't be happy with someone else either. You'll just be distracted from your unhappiness for a while. You'll just be using other people as emotional band-aids for wounds they didn't cause and can't heal. People who are comfortable being alone have done the work. They've sat with themselves, really sat with themselves, and figured out how to generate their own contentment. They've built hobbies they enjoy, created routines that fulfill them, developed a relationship with themselves that's actually healthy. So when they do connect with others, it's coming from a place of abundance, not scarcity. They're not desperately trying to fill a void. They're not clinging to people out of fear. They're sharing their already full life with someone who enhances it, not completes it. And that's what makes them so dangerous to anyone who tries to play games. Because games only work on people who are desperate, on people who are afraid of losing what they have. But someone who's already happy alone, they're not afraid of loss. They know they'll be fine either way. Here's something that drives people absolutely crazy about those who are comfortable being alone. They're selective, painfully selective. They don't let just anyone into their life. They don't accept every social invitation. They don't maintain friendships out of obligation or history, or because it would be awkward not to. They filter hard, and their filter has one simple question. Does this person add value to my life? Not potential value. Not value they might bring if they change, but actual tangible right-now value. Do they make them laugh? Do they challenge them intellectually? Do they bring positive energy? Do they respect boundaries? Do they show up when it matters? If the answer to these questions is no, if someone is taking more than they're giving, draining more than they're filling, complicating more than they're enhancing, they're out. No second chances, no benefit of the doubt, just a clean assessment and a cleaner exit. Is that harsh? Maybe. Is it practical? Absolutely. Because people who are comfortable being alone understand something crucial. Time and energy are finite resources. Wasting them on people who don't reciprocate isn't noble or kind, it's just poor life management. They'd rather have 3 genuine connections than 30 superficial ones. They'd rather spend Friday night alone doing something they enjoy than at a party full of people who drain them. Quality over quantity, always. You know where most people mess up with someone like this? They assume silence means weakness. They assume someone who doesn't fight back, doesn't argue, doesn't demand respect must not know their worth. So they test them. Maybe not consciously, but they do it anyway. They start showing up late without apology. They talk over them in group settings to see if they'll fight for attention. They make plans with others right in front of them to check if jealousy kicks in. They suddenly become too busy for weeks. And when the person doesn't react the way they expected, when they don't beg for attention or fight for the relationship, they assume it worked. They assume they have the upper hand now. What they don't realize is that they've already lost. Because people who are comfortable being alone aren't playing the same game. They're not trying to win your attention or prove their value. They're simply observing your behavior and making decisions based on what you're showing them. You're showing them you don't respect their time? Noted. Decision made, exit planned. They'll just quietly remove themselves from the situation and move on with their life. By the time you realize what happened, they're already gone. And trying to get them back, good luck with that. Because once someone who's comfortable being alone makes up their mind about you, it's over. They don't do rounds 2 and 3. They don't believe in giving people unlimited chances to treat them poorly. They gave you one chance. You showed them who you were. They believed you. End of story. Let me tell you what it's like to be on the other side of this. To be someone who genuinely doesn't mind being alone, who's done the work to be happy with themselves. It's freedom. Pure, unfiltered freedom. Freedom from toxic people because you're not afraid to let them go. Freedom from bad relationships because you're not terrified of being single. Freedom from social obligations that drain you because you're perfectly content with your own company. Freedom to say no without guilt. Freedom to have standards without apology. Freedom to walk away from anything that doesn't serve you. Most people will never experience this kind of freedom. They're too busy holding on to things they should let go of, tolerating people they should remove, compromising their peace for the sake of not being alone. But people who are comfortable being alone, they understand that the price of freedom is the willingness to be by yourself. And they've decided that price is worth paying, because being alone and happy beats being surrounded and miserable every single time. The warning sign. So here's what you need to understand. If you have someone like this in your life, if they're choosing to spend time with you despite not needing to, you've got something special. You've got someone who's there because they want to be, not because they're afraid of the alternative, but that comes with responsibility. The responsibility to recognize what you have. The responsibility to show up with the same energy they bring. The responsibility to respect their time, their boundaries, their standards. Because here's the warning, they will leave, not eventually, not someday. The moment you show them that you don't value what they bring to the table, they're gone. No drama, no second chances, No opportunity to explain yourself, just gone. And you can spend the rest of your life trying to figure out what happened, trying to get them back, trying to understand why they won't give you another shot. But the truth is simple. They did the math and you didn't add up. They chose themselves, they chose their peace. They chose to walk away from something that wasn't serving them. And that's the power of someone who doesn't mind being alone. They'll always choose themselves, every single time. So what's the point of all this? The point is that if you're dealing with someone who's comfortable being alone, you need to bring your A game. Not because they're difficult or demanding or unreasonable, but because they have options. And one of those options is being perfectly happy by themselves. They don't need you to complete them. They don't need you to make their life meaningful. They don't need you to validate their existence. They're choosing you. Right now, in this moment, they're choosing to let you into their life. And that choice can be unmade just as easily as it was made. So treat them right. Show up when you say you will. Respect their time, value what they bring to the table. Don't take them for granted just because they're not demanding your attention. Because the person who's comfortable being alone will always have somewhere to go when you mess up. Home. To themselves, where they're perfectly content. And once they go there, they're probably not coming back. Now you know. If this made you think about someone in your life, someone you might be taking for granted because they seem so chill, so low maintenance, so okay with everything, maybe it's time to check yourself. Share this with someone who needs to understand why that person in their life, who seems so cool, so easygoing, so unbothered, suddenly isn't there anymore. They didn't change. They just stopped accepting less than they deserved. And subscribe for more real talk that cuts through the noise and shows you what's really going on in these relationships, these connections, these situations we all navigate, but nobody wants to talk about, honestly. Because the people who are comfortable being alone, they're not the problem, they never were. They're just the ones who figured out the game early and decided they'd rather not play. See you in the next one. Till then, have a blessed and peaceful life, my friends.